you ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. My name is Paul Kilduff-Taylor, and joining me once again is the indispensable Ian Hardingham.
Hello, welcome to Visiting the Village.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
The new Nintendo NES Classic has sold out very quickly. One Polygon writer believes that this is a deliberate strategy of managed scarcity, and it's one that Nintendo regularly employs. For example, the prolonged Wii shortage. Do you believe in managed scarcity?
I think this is something that some people have done. I don't know if Nintendo's doing it here. This article says that they should have been able to tell by Twitter that the NES Classic was going to be really, really popular, and they should have made a lot more. If I was going to ask Nintendo a question about this, I'd like to know if they think that having more inventory at launch is actually important, or if they can sell the same number of units in the next 48 months, for instance. I don't think that's true. I would want to sell as many as I could on day one. Obviously, they want to find out how well it's selling before they commit to a lot of inventory. So I'm kind of more just saying that maybe I'm going to go with them being a bit more cautious than doing this as a cynical ploy.
Yeah, I think I would go with the caution. Having said that, I mean, the scarcity of something building up into Christmas is a known strategy for selling a lot of an item at Christmas. So, and that's kind of what you want to do. You want to be available in that purchasing slot. I think running out of inventory at that point is surely a bad thing. But retail is very difficult. The last thing you want to do is overproduce something.
Absolutely. You have to end up burying it in the desert in Arizona. Yeah, it would seem ridiculous. Even if they were going to manage scarcity at the launch, they should definitely inject a whole load of new units into the marketplace in December. But I'm kind of glad that I don't have to worry about physical units.
Yes. I'm interested by just how popular this is. I mean, it's clearly a good novelty item. It clearly has a lot of popularity with a certain generation, and it's kind of in that sort of present price range. But I'm a little bit surprised that it's this popular, and I would imagine that Nintendo are as well.
Yeah, from what I can gather, people who gamed a lot when they were youngsters and haven't gamed for sort of 30 or 40 years now are the people who are really excited by this. I guess it would be 30 years. So I think it's people who don't play on their Xbox every day that are most excited by this. That's just what I'm getting. Maybe that's wrong. I have to say it doesn't really attract me. These closed systems, it's just something about it I don't find at all attractive. I can get a lot of these games on Nintendo Virtual Console if I need to. I don't really like having another box under my TV personally, so it's not for me. But you said you're somewhat interested in it.
It's interesting. I think a lot of the attraction is about how you rate different types of convenience. So for you, it's sort of more convenient to just buy a game when you want it than it is to get a new thing and set it up. Whereas for me, I think having a reason to have all of these games in a very accessible format. I have a Mega Drive, and I've tried various things to kind of get a good picture from it, and it's really hard to do that. And then I go online and I end up looking at upscalers that cost money and stuff like that. And then retro gaming is not my hobby. I quite like to play some retro games occasionally. So at 50 quid, this is a good product for me. It means I can just buy that. I can have the fun of, the funny little unit and everything. And I can plug it into my TV and it just works. I can play basically all of the NES games I would consider playing apart from Nintendo World Cup, which is a shocking oversight, very easily. So I definitely find that attractive.
That's cool. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm also not that into the NES era. Actually, the SNES is the place where I think games really sort of came of age, and I still find the NES generation a little bit immature and simplistic, just in terms of the form. For instance, I know the first two Zeldas are kind of a classic, but I just much prefer the SNES and Game Boy era ones. So that's just my own subjectivity.
I think making this completely closed was a good plan when it was like a toy product, and now looks like a bad plan to me. I think that you're going to sell in a lot of units of this, and I think some way of buying additional games for it, even if it's just, I don't know, you have to buy them on a USB stick or something and then put that in the machine and it accepts them and it uploads them into the machine. Even that, I think, would be a good idea for the amount of install base they're going to have.
I agree it would be good to have some way of having DLC for this, but I'm also looking at how much it would increase the per unit cost to do that.
Yeah.
And it's also quite complicated, so I can definitely see why they didn't do that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's attractive about it is just how much different it is from an Xbox One, where it's just plays these 30 games and that's it. Doesn't wash your hair for you or anything. So I can see both sides of that.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense, and if it's a big decision in terms of price point to do that, then yes. But I feel like someone's going to be kicking themselves when this sells a ridiculous number of units.
Yeah, maybe they'll release some really obscure dock for it.
They need like the NES Classic S that has
exactly
a port on it. All right. A topic from Ben Newhouse now. Thank you, Ben. This article is called Virtual Sports, the New Esports. It's an interesting article from VC firm Brave Ventures. It kind of ranges around a lot. It talks a bit about the difficulty that some people have in assimilating sort of fantastical content within their esports. It talks about the dominance of traditional sports. And it also talks about the rising involvement of traditional sports franchises and teams within the esports space. Did you get anything from this?
I had a varying number of emotions while reading this. I think that the article is about this company trying to sell the concept that the thing after League of Legends and CSGO is actually FIFA. In terms of the idea of games like FIFA and Madden becoming sort of a professional esport, just like League of Legends is now. It definitely felt like a pitch document in some ways. It definitely felt like I was being pitched this concept. And I didn't really agree with a lot of the conclusions. One of the most interesting things is this article posits that in order for this to happen for FIFA and Madden, they have to stop charging you once a year for it. Because every time a new generation comes out, you massively split the players. So they posit this idea, which I can kind of get behind, although I'm not overwhelmingly sure that you would have to get rid of that format to make this a proper esport, a successful esport. But they say that given that it's going to be difficult to get Electronic Arts to do that, but they're sort of saying that this is going to happen eventually. They're going to switch to a subscription model. So all of my alarm bells for nonsense went off there because I actually don't think you have to get rid of the yearly updates.
No.
For this. I mean, if you look at something just like Magic the Gathering, I mean, the whole thing is based around a periodic refreshment of the scene.
Yes.
And actually, one of the best things about having a professional league is that you get to sell the new version of your stuff to all the people who are watching.
Yeah.
So I my faith in this article was sort of undermined at a few points. And I also sort of basically, in a completely sort of making a cool way, I disagree with the idea that virtual sports, which is slightly difficult to... I think it's a fairly unclear name, but that's what this guy is calling FIFA and Madden. The idea that they will overtake things like League of Legends and Counter-Strike Go, I don't actually agree with. I don't necessarily think they've got what it takes to get there as competitive games, which I think you have to have a proper competitive scene. So a thoughts dump from me there.
Interesting combination of things. I mean, this kind of, I suppose it's a report technically, sort of a report trying to encourage investors to come in. It's written by 3 people, and I feel like it's I feel like it's trying to pull itself in multiple directions. I got the same sense as you. Now, I'm going to start with something that I find really interesting, and I think is a good, valid contribution to this discussion. It's the idea of these having 10 million monthly active users is like the threshold for something to be an esport, for something to sustain a professional scene. And I mean, whatever you think about that number, I'm really happy that now people are coming out with numbers for this, and those numbers are really, really massive. Because that backs up a lot of what we've been saying for a long time, which is always nice, and it backs up a lot of thought that people have in the space, which is that you cannot go out and sort of make an esports scene out of any old thing. It needs 10 million monthly active users. That's a ridiculously high number in order to sustain a situation where people are going to make their livelihoods by playing your game. I'm just happy to see someone take that seriously and put a number on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I loved seeing that stat. This article should have had a better headline. It should have been about that stat, because that's so compelling. What I find really nice about that number is that that's just a little less than the best estimates for what the number of active Magic the Gathering users is. So they think it's in the low teens of millions.
Right.
So that's great. That's kind of right around there, because it's probably fair to say that Magic's status as a viewership esport is a struggle. It's not definitely a failure. It's also definitely not a success, like a definite success. So being around that number makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I really like that. You know, I don't know if I'm just being too reactionary to say I don't think FIFA can be one of these games, but you know, thousands of games are released every year, and kind of to your point, only one or two a year really break out as a massive thing. I don't, you know, why would you expect a game like FIFA or Madden to do that? Well, because it's got a huge number of players already.
Yeah.
I think seeing what kind of competitive balance has to exist for something to break out is really interesting. It makes me wonder whether has Rocket League got there, or is Rocket League sort of simmering just below the level of being an interesting esport, because I don't see much coverage of that. So
Psionics are running a pretty big league at the moment that I don't know if it's doing numbers on Twitch. It's certainly visible on Twitch a lot, and it's advertised in the front panel of Rocket League. And it's a big prize pool, and there's a lot of teams involved with that. So the Rocket League esports scene is happening, and this is not going to be really that relevant to anything, because I find some esports hard to watch. I have watched now enough Rocket League that I know that I don't enjoy watching it. It's very hard to watch. You don't really get the right... When you watch football, soccer, you get an interesting appreciation of the overall movement of the teams, the gaps between players where they're trying to create space. You get a very overall tactical sense. In Rocket League, it's kind of just four people pinging a ball around randomly, and then it goes in the goal.
What's the viewpoint in coverage of Rocket League?
It's a director cam with occasional first person.
Does the director tend to look at the whole field from above?
Yes, it tends to be a shot that keeps as much in frame as possible, and it's sort of normally oriented around the center of the pitch. But they do switch to player view. I mean, I call it first person as in first person for the human view occasionally. Sure. And the things I like watching about it, the individual skill, and it's interesting to see how people approach specific situations when you're playing the game a lot. You really see how much better these people are than you, and how they can, their spatial awareness is incredible. That's great. By the same token, if you go to a football match, it's amazing to watch someone do great ball control things, but that's not why you're there. You're there to watch the game. So it doesn't stand up for me. I don't think it's going to be a big sort of visual esport. It is interesting, though, the point that this article makes about the accessibility of some of this stuff. Like, there is a factor where if it's Wizards and whatever, it's not going to cross over completely. You can't have a game that's sort of got fantasy characters in it casting spells that is going to completely cross over. But it might just be a generational thing where everyone who's grown up with that as a normal aesthetic is in the kind of right bracket to consume it. And it may just be one of those 20-year problems.
Yeah, I did buy that point to a certain extent. I've harped on this point before, but I don't think we've had a great spectator esports yet. All of the esports that I can think of are still driven by the fact people like to play them first, so they can enjoy watching them. And I just don't think there's been one which is really compelling just on the back of what you're seeing, beyond the context of you having played it, of you knowing the scene, etc. And that's got to happen. I don't believe that's impossible to happen, even though it is a bit harder when there's a bit more of a disconnect between the human beings, who are always going to be the most compelling part, and the action. Like, that's just a hurdle that esports has to get over. But I still find the spectator cameras, games are designed to be viewed through the first person, whatever the camera of the player is. And these games still suffer, especially stuff like Counter-Strike, of trying to get a viewpoint which makes sense for an observer, because those two things, I just don't think they're likely to be the same kind of thing. For a game like that, obviously, something like League of Legends or StarCraft 2, the camera isn't really a problem. It tends to be the complexity of the game that's a problem. Again, StarCraft 2 is the game that by far that I've most enjoyed watching. I found it compelling to watch. But, I mean, I think it's sort of... The thing that you said about Rocket League is really compelling. It just doesn't turn out that that's a good spectator sport. I don't think it's because of any inherent limitation that games have. I just think it turns out that the macro view of a Rocket League game isn't actually as fun to watch as you might imagine.
Yeah.
I think we'll get something that is both an amazing game and is really compelling to watch in the next 4 years. I just don't think we've had it yet.
Yeah, I've always slightly disagreed with your point of view on the extent to which you have to play a game, the extent to which an audience has to cross over with a player base, basically. I think you tend to make that in quite an absolute way, and I agree with it in a graded way. I always want to just nudge that along. There are a lot of people who watch esports who have barely played the game in question. Maybe they've played it a couple of times. That does exist. It's not an overwhelming number of people, but it does exist. And I think that is something that can grow over time. And also there's a phenomenon which is much more real of people being introduced to games by watching them. And that has some interesting connotations. So I always want to put that disclaimer on there. I agree with you. I think, Rocket League is an interesting place to start from. I don't think there's been much innovation in that kind of genre space. I do not buy if a single game does well, that means it's just that game, it's not a genre thing. I think that's been comprehensively disproved with MOBAs now. And I think Rocket League is there. That I think there's room for at least 2 games in each of these big spaces, and Rocket League doesn't have a competitor yet.
That's interesting. I'd have to think a bit more about that. I think that a genre like MOBA is easier to make a game that has all of the crucial elements but feels very different. Sort of ditto if you look at, say, Magic versus Hearthstone. I'm trying to imagine what it might look like, what the major competitor to Rocket League might look like, because it's got to have so much of the core gameplay. Like, it's got to be a ball, and it's got to have so much of the movement-based control. I'm not saying it's impossible. You could have another game that's sort of technically in the same kind of genre, but also manages to nail this incredibly different, amazing movement mechanics. But if you're going with a sort of a simile to League of Legends and other MOBAs, I think it's got to be very similar to Rocket League in how it looks, because League of Legends, MOBAs don't have to look the same. Yeah. To be the similar basic kind of genre and to share the sort of the crack of that genre.
Yeah.
If you're retaining the basics of the genre of Rocket League, I think obviously it could be rendered in a different way, but do you know what I mean? It's going to look more similar to Rocket League. More
similar than Dota does to League of Legends?
Yeah, I guess so. And I'm making, I think, a difficult to... I'm not sure my point holds complete water, but it's like if you... I don't know, if I watch League of Legends and I watch Dota 2, I understand they're the same genre, and I can focus on the different sort of unit decisions and the different... And if I'm looking at Hearthstone versus Magic, I can look at the linear mana curve of Hearthstone, I'm getting a bit away from graphics now.
Sure.
If I'm looking at what are the fundamental-ish things you could change about Rocket League for a competitor, I guess I'm trying to work out what those would be. Would it be 3 goals? Because it can't be a triangular ball.
I agree. I think for that kind of game, because it's more mechanically limited, it necessarily has to... the mechanics necessarily have to be similar, is probably the point.
That is basically what I'm trying to say. It feels like it's a more... that there's less range within that genre.
I think that I disagree with that, because I don't think we've seen anyone try anything yet. And I think when it happens, it will be one of those like stupidly obvious things that anyone could have predicted. It will almost be maybe like 3 goals, maybe not the dumbest idea, but maybe it's like speedball style additional stuff on the pitch. And maybe it's humans instead of cars that have different movements slightly and one more ability. That's the kind of thing that I'm imagining.
Okay, I'm a little dubious about that, but I will reflect on it.
Yes, I think that's definitely going to happen in some form at some point, because nothing is ever that popular without an eventual imitator or competitor.
Yeah,
It's
no, I think
literally
I definitely do think there'll be clones, and it would be really interesting to see what those clones are like. I will really enjoy to see what they try and change, and what they feel like they have to keep the same. I'm interested. Do you think you would buy a clone if it was like well rated? Would you be interested to try?
Oh, immediately, straight away.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And it's funny because I don't want to play with mutators in Rocket League. I don't feel like that's where it's kind of going to come from. And I've tried a couple of them and they're really boring. They tend to sort of change. I think there's like one fundamental thing you have to change about the game in order to achieve an interesting clone. And I'm not sure what that is yet, because if I was, maybe I would be able to make lots of money. Good.
As opposed to being a plumber.
RPS spoke to Crusader Kings 2 director Henrik Farrois. I'd like to apologise for my attempt to pronounce his name. About the opinions mechanic of the game and how it interacts with preset scripts and AI direction in order to create dynamic and emergent stories. Ian Hardingham, you're working on a relationship system for AI characters in a game right now. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed this article. I'm going to get super specific super quickly because there's a very specific thing here that I wanted to talk about. He said that he was playing around with trying to get more of the kind of storylines that they want to see emerging dynamically. So, just in case you don't know, listeners, Crusader Kings 2 is a grand strategy game set in Europe. I believe it's set only in Europe, possibly Russia as well. And it has lots and lots of political intrigue. It's the kind of game that you could easily make a Game of Thrones mod of. And in fact, Game of Thrones kind of feeds into this. Now, he says he's playing around with ideas like there being a nemesis, another country who always sort of pop up and cause you massive problems, and you kind of never quite get rid of them. And I just immediately reacted massively badly to this concept. What Crusader Kings has managed to achieve is a fully dynamic map where loads of the kind of stories that people want emerge dynamically. And he's talking about investigating stuff, which I think undermines that. It's like you've got the end result, the amazing end goal of this stuff actually emerging from your code. And now you're talking about sort of hard coding it. Do you know what I mean?
I didn't get that from what he was saying. I didn't think that they were actually attempting to limit the system in order to produce those outcomes more often.
Okay.
I think he was talking about deconstructing. So the idea he used was vengeance. I think he was talking about deconstructing that, the phases of how that happens, and using that to inform the system. Like vengeance, how can we break that down into pieces? It seems like a deconstruction approach rather than a sort of outside-in approach, which I agree would make no sense.
Okay, I'm going to quote directly from this article. Another thing Farus would like to develop is the game's ability to build stories. He's been exploring the idea of building a system that can detect the natural emergence of a story in the game and guiding emergence, trying to make it happen in a more directed and focused way, a little like a game master. So again, when I read that, I kind of imagine he's going to find some way of pattern matching something like an emerging rivalry, maybe, or possibly if there's a country that almost kills you but doesn't quite, like that could be the start, the thing that he's detecting. And then I'm kind of interested in what he wants to do there. Whether, it's about sort of starting to get some specialized dialogue in. But really, it feels to me that what's going to happen then is that that's going to then have an impact on the decisions that are being made moving forward. And say this country that's been detected as this role player for the player's story, then starts taking on special characteristics so that he's more likely to make decisions that will support the story that has been detected as emerging. I think that's really interesting, but again, it feels like you are... I think that this game is successful because people believe that it models something really exciting, and this stuff feels to me like it's going away from the modelling approach to, something more directed, and that feels to me like going away from the Crusader Kings ideal.
Yeah, I never know with this kind of thing. To me, it's always the degree of intelligence that's applied to it. So this thing that he's talking about, you have a nemesis. He says he shouldn't be immune to death, but the random number should be in his favor because it keeps him around and giving him comebacks, and you will feel as a player, why won't this guy ever die? Now, there's a way in which that could be the worst thing possible, where it's, as you say, it's divergent from the purity of the system. And it feels overly constructed, and maybe you start to recognize the patterns. And then there's a way in which it could be great. It could be the game is just supporting the possibility of an interesting thing happening, but it still allows for this kind of unpredictable behavior. You've got all of these trait systems that they talk about earlier in the article on top of this that cause, players have complained that it causes, kind of random behavior. As long as you keep that intact, if you do it in an intelligent way, I think it could be good.
Some of that's fine, but again, like he's specifically talking about weighing the dice rolls in favor of a certain kind of behavior, and it just feels very wrong. Like he's very specifically saying that the idea is that you'd find this nemesis and you'd actually make him harder to kill. It kind of feels a little bit like all the furore around auto-leveling.
I knew you were going to bring up auto-leveling. I was just going to say that this is unlike auto-leveling and would bear no comparison to it whatsoever.
So it feels to me that it's the game being reactive in order to give you a specific experience, which I think could be said of auto-leveling as well.
Well, incredibly broadly. I mean, auto-leveling is the most crude... Auto-leveling is overriding any kind of simulation completely in order to create a specific difficulty level, and it's done in a brute force way. It's basically just the crudest, widest, blandest possible form of this kind of intervention. And this, I think, has the potential, and we've had this conversation quite a few times. Like, for me, it's about the outcome. If the outcome of this is that you get a greater incidence of more interesting things happening that still respond according to the rules of the simulation is not overridden, I just can't see how that could be bad. Like, I can't be a complete purist about this, because the purity of the system doesn't matter. It's the outcome that the player experiences. So far, when people have tried to do things like this, it's pretty much exclusively been bad. And I think that's down to the approach, not the philosophy.
So I agree with you as far as that the Fallout 3 auto-leveling thing is very, very broad and very, very bland. I definitely agree with that. I'm super intrigued by having the conversation about whether it matters what the system is, as long as you get a certain outcome. Like, it definitely sounds like something I don't agree with, because I think that it's kind of about, do you have faith in the system that it's producing something interesting and it's part of your journey to get to the outcome. People want more and more emergent games, and what they want to happen at the end of the emergence is that they get an experience as rich as a highly directed game, say, such as Dishonored 2. What everyone would like is if a game that was as dynamic emergent as Crusader Kings 2 or RimWorld or something actually made gameplay that was as amazing as something really scripted. So I don't know where to start on disagreeing with you that it doesn't matter what the system's doing if the outcome is good. Like, I'm trying to get a foothold on the first part of that I just don't agree with, and I guess it's about people only enter into the contract of working hard to have the experience if they believe that they are taking part in something where a wide variety of things can happen. It's very reactive to everything the player's doing, and the game's not suddenly going to go sort of get short-circuited down a specific path because of something happening.
I think that might be projection to some extent. Like, I think that's something that you care about enormously, the extent to which a system is directly responsible for something happening. Whereas I think people vary on this hugely. I mean, even if you look at the scope of games generally, you know, from like a Dishonored versus a Call of Duty, for example. It proves that there's a very wide range in terms of Dishonored has some emergence. It's about designed levels that have discrete systems within them that interact, and Call of Duty has no emergence. It just throws stuff at you constantly. So I feel like there's a grade here, and I feel like the desire for knowing that the system is pure is not something that everyone experiences.
I'm not suggesting you get rid of Call of Duty, but I am possibly suggesting that people who select to have an experience of playing Crusader Kings 2 are not looking for the same things they're looking for when they play Call of Duty. I think, obviously, you're right that there are lots of people who want to go and have a cinematic experience, but what I got from the whole Fallout 3 auto-leveling thing was not this creates a bad experience, but this undermines my belief in the system. That's definitely what I got from people's complaints about that.
I think, well, if you take a sort of a more philosophical approach, it's necessarily true that if you don't know that this is happening and there is no way of telling, that it doesn't matter what the system's doing.
Okay, so if you play, though, Crusader Kings 2 a bunch of times, I guess one of the bad things that's detectable, which I know is a slightly different approach to this conversation, is that you may see more similar things happening.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of just about necessarily true that he is narrowing the range of outcomes, I would say, by doing this.
Yes.
So
because if this thing detects something, then it will
narrows something based on that.
To some extent, a repeated behavior, even if that repeated behavior contains a lot of entropy.
Yeah, so I think there are two conversations here. There's what is the stuff that you're actually losing here, and for me that is also very real. Like if I want to have more sort of nemesis kind of activity, then I want to make a broad rule that people under certain circumstances will be less likely to die or something, rather than something that's so responsive to a specific player thing. And again, and you notice something that's very important to Frozen Synapse 2. Crusader Kings 2 is really based around all of the countries kind of having a lot of their own agency, like a lot of them sort of acting like players.
Yeah.
So again, the idea of moving to a more player-centric model is something I definitely find unattractive. So I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of my own personal stuff in here, but I think I really will have to think a lot about the idea that it doesn't matter what the system is doing as long as you get a good result, because I feel like so much of what people get out of games is taking part in a thing that they actually have control over. And sort of, it's true that there will be games will cheat, even games that say that they're incredibly emergent and do everything in a non-player centric way will cheat in ways that you don't know.
Yeah.
And they'll also like cheat in really sort of subtle user interface ways. I mean, just something as simple as we were talking to the Soki42 guys last night about the new snowboarding game from Ubisoft and how they've made it harder to jump, because in almost all games like this, you can press the jump button shortly after you've actually left the ground and it will still give you the proper jump, right?
Yeah.
So that there are lots of very subtle things like that which ease you along. But anyway, yeah, I think that faith in the system is really important to people, and I do think that that's what the auto leveling thing was about. I heard much more complaining that it was like, well, why am I even bothering to invest in this system, than I had the wrong difficulty experience at X time.
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of wrap this up, like, I don't think there are many times where I would, if I was involved with a game like Crusader Kings 2, I don't think I would want to take this direction with it, because it seems like it's so hard to get to a good outcome that once you've started, I would rather invest that time on improving the system. So if you and I were actually making this decision, we would definitely agree. My problem is with the absolutism of any intervention in the system is bad. It's just not something I agree with, because I just don't think we've ever seen it done well. I think people's faith in a system, it's a little bit similar to how they relate to characters in, say, a TV show or a film. When something is done badly and it breaks a suspension of disbelief, people start to complain about things in very different ways, and they articulate that stuff in different ways. But throughout all of those things, there is a constant process of manipulation happening. And I think it's just when the manipulation gets detected or it's too crass that it's a problem. And I would definitely say the same is true of a lot of games. I mean, Call of Duty is just overtly crass. It embraces its crassness entirely. But you've seen other games that sort of, even little things like spawning more enemies in at a certain time or having certain things happen in certain locations, it just feels wrong within the context of the game. And I think that's where the problem, I think the problem is with the dissonance, not with the philosophical approach.
Yeah, okay. I think it's also that players don't want to feel the game is responding to them in ways that isn't part of the core game experience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, respawning and spawning of enemies is also a big game issue. Anyway, maybe we should revisit this in future episodes.
I'm sure we will. According to MCV, sales in the UK of the regular PS4 went up considerably in the week around the launch of the PS4 Pro. Are we ready to call the PS4 Pro a success?
Yep, sounds like it. Sounds like people really wanted a more powerful PlayStation. And because the Xbox One Scorpio is so far away, people weren't worried about the reports that the Scorpio is going to be more powerful than the PS4 Pro. If you're a hardcore PS4 player, you bought it 3 years ago, just like you and I did, and maybe you're like, yes, I want my things to be high resolution now.
Yeah.
I'm a bit baffled by the 4K HDR thing, but I'm always late to the party on this stuff. Like, I still like my HD TV, and I would always, as we've said ad nauseum, I'd much rather have a good frame rate than have 4,000 vertical pixels or whatever it is. But yes, this sounds to me like an unqualified success.
This argument around 4K, I'm going to return to something that I've almost certainly said more than once. I was in a shop and I saw a 4K TV and they had a normal TV next to it, and the 4K TV was showing a football match, and it looked better than anything I'd ever seen on the screen before. It was absolutely amazing. And 4K is the new HD, where people will just slap it on anything, and it can mean, something upscaled, and it can mean a million different things. But 4K as a technology, to someone who doesn't care about this stuff, it's immediately visually an enormous amount better. It's like the difference between Blu-ray and DVD when you see it in a proper setup. So that's fine. And if this, if people are really buying into this and the PS4 Pro really delivers that in the true sense, then of course it makes sense. I'm surprised by how well this did, nearly outselling the Xbox One as well. I think it's just 5,000 units behind, according to this. It's a
lot more expensive than the Xbox One.
I know, it's pretty crazy, but the PS4 is a real juggernaut. I guess this is a win for the new non-console generations, the sub-generations. I guess that's where we are now.
Yeah, I guess so. I just don't think we're going to be able to work out what's going on there until Scorpio comes out. Because
Yeah.
I've kind of moved my thinking to be like, whoever's currently not leading in the console race is going to like want to call the next generation. So I think there might be a bit of pressure that hasn't been talked about from one or other side to sort of call a new generation, which might get in the way of this sort of wonderful future of no generations.
Indeed. Yes, I agree. French stock market regulators have accused 5 Ubisoft employees of insider trading. Allegedly, the employees sold stock in the days running up to announcement of delays for both the original Watch Dogs and The Crew. What do you think about this?
Well, from reading this article, it sounds like these guys did it. The timing and the fact that it was 5 people selling significant stock shortly before an announcement that led to the company's stock dropping 25%. I'm not an SEC investigator, but if I was, this sounds like an open and shut case. So this is just these are the rules. This is about maintaining the integrity of the stocks and shares system. And bad Ubisoft, I guess, or bad
Yeah.
Ubisoft employees.
Worth pointing out, it's been strenuously denied by both the people involved. Ubisoft have also stressed that they haven't been accused of anything. It's just these individuals. I wanted to talk about this primarily because insider trading is so interesting within the context of games, because the share price of gaming companies moves on like the tiniest thing, and this happens of course with really, really big companies, announcements of delays in product and so on. But it just made me think, like, I mean, yes, I agree externally on the information that's presented in these news reports, which the reliability of which is dubious, because it's a news report. I think it looks bad. I think this is what insider trading can look like externally. But it's just interesting to me that, like, it's the rules don't protect you from this. If you suspected a game of being delayed from something you heard someone say in the corridor, that's still insider trading. Like, it's just so hard to own shares in a company where you work there and not be exposed to this kind of problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That all sounds really reasonable.
Hooray.
I have nothing to add, I'm sorry.
Clearly. A user posted a screenshot from their pre-release copy of Watch Dogs 2, which included fairly detailed female genitalia, and was subsequently banned from signing into their PlayStation account for 1 month due to posting vulgar content. I bet you're going to have something to say about this one, Ian, because it's got fannies in it. What do you think about this?
Fannies. So this is, honestly, I think this has been widely misreported. This has been reported a lot that Sony not only banned him for posting this to Twitter, which I think is definitely not true, but has also been reported as extending the ban because he talked about it on Twitter, which doesn't appear to be true. I know it's funny, the idea that there's a vagina in a PlayStation game and then Sony ban you for posting it onto a PlayStation forum, but it's not really funny. It just makes complete sense. I mean, just because, I don't know, Disney make an 18 film that has some nakedness in it, that doesn't mean that it's somehow ironic when they tell you can't post that to one of their message boards. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be anything going on here apart from people misrepresenting the facts.
So, to just clarify this, you're saying that this has been misreported because it wasn't his action posting it to Twitter that was the problem. It was something else.
He was banned for posting it onto a Sony forum that had specific rules about nudity or whatever.
Yeah.
Not because he took a picture of a PlayStation game and posted it on Twitter, which would be an insane thing to ban someone for. Like,
yes,
that would be a gigantic headline if that was true.
That is true, and that's kind of where this has been angled. Where is the source for the posting of it to the forum being the specific problem?
So basically, I went down a bit of I think it was a NeoGAF hole of reading his posts, and basically his posts are like, I shared this on, I think it's called PlayStation Live or something, and then I got this email, and then it became more muddied because and I'm not really sure why this is, but apparently they re-reviewed his case and changed it from a 1 week to 1 month ban. But
Wow.
again, like, I understand why you want to go with this is because he's talking about it on the internet, but I really think that would be a crazy thing for Sony to do. Like, I would just find that a very, very, very strange thing to do. That because this guy was complaining about being banned for posting a picture of a vagina from Watch Dogs 2 on NeoGAF, you would extend his ban. That does not make sense to me as a defensible action from a big company.
No, yeah, this is a mess. You're right. The reporting of this is a big mess. It's pretty difficult to dig down into this and find out what's going on.
There's also an amazing conspiracy theory that Jim got me onto, which is that there's a PlayStation service which trolls Twitter for all tweets, including the hashtag PS4 share tag, and then like puts them on a PlayStation forum. So there's like a conspiracy theory that he actually got banned because his tweet was picked up by a bot. But again, by a Sony bot. But again, that doesn't really hold water because I believe it is definitely true that he posted it to a PlayStation. I'm using the word forum sort of more generally, not like a specific internet forum. Anyway, it's a mess.
This is like... So I have this problem where I detect an issue with the general assumptions made by reports on something, and you have detected the same issue. And my normal response to this, it just goes one of two ways. It's a Paul psychology coin flip. Either I'm going to spend the next week reading about this until I've established what I actually think, or I'm never going to think about it again. So I'm going to move on from like the provenance of this and just sort of talk about this a little bit more generally, because from what I've seen, like, it doesn't really make any sense that they've got quite sort of detailed vaginas in this game.
The story is that Sony have since asked them to remove them, and that this got through CERT.
Yeah. Again,
so
like,
I just like to read. I have to read the quote from the guy's NeoGAF forum. On Sunday evening, I accidentally blew up a few women in a back alley with a gas pipe, and then I saw it, which is just about the most ridiculous sentence of all time. So apparently, Sony didn't come across this because they didn't accidentally blow up anyone in a back alley with a gas pipe, and now have asked Watch Dogs to have it removed. So it's all a bit of a mess. I mean, I think I have to say, I think there's been quite a lot of shall we say, people making this an issue about the fact that it's female genitalia and not male.
Yep.
And I'm never going to make too strong a statement either way on that, but I will say that I think this probably would have happened with male genitalia as well. And it's a bit of a mess. I have to say, I'm just looking at this picture, and I'm sort of like, yeah, maybe we don't have to have this kind of nudity after killing someone. Maybe.
It seems a bit unnecessary in that it doesn't sort of serve any purpose in the game. I mean, I don't know if like so Watch Dogs 2, it has this sort of the endless thing of you hack people and you find out embarrassing secrets of them. So maybe, I don't know, there's naughty pictures or something that they have on their phone. Who knows? It's just such a perfect storm of like it almost seems completely made up to me, but it clearly isn't. And also the person who would have made it up has nothing to gain from it. But it's such a perfect story because it's got, the sort of offensive imagery. It's got the whole debate around female sexuality and sexual depiction in games. It's got like the overweening banning thing. I mean, maybe like if I was at a blog and I really didn't have anything to post that day, I might well make this up. It's one of those stories.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's probably enough about that. I'm worried that I'm now going to have to find out what happened.
We navigated through that well.
Oh, did we? Who knows? Atlas Obscura have an article about the surprising longevity of the Sega Master System and Mega Drive in Brazil. Now, I include this here just primarily because this is kind of a mono point thing. This article is really great. We did talk about this before, I think, as well. So go and read this on Atlas Obscura.
Yeah, we did. We kind of have to update because the last... Yeah, go on.
Yeah. we were talking about this news story which came out about the Mega Drive being reissued in Brazil, and it was reissued by Tectoy, who, according to this article, have had a long-standing relationship with Sega to remanufacture the Mega Drive, which is a continuing success over there in Brazil, and quite right too, because it's a great games console. That's about it for that.
Yeah, before finishing this, I think the most interesting thought of this article is that Brazil have really punitive tax stuff on consoles and everything else that aren't manufactured in Brazil. So basically,
Right.
The PS4 costs something like the equivalent of $1,000 there, and the Mega Drive costs $50. So another reason why it stayed so competitive is because as long as these guys actually create the console manufacture it within Brazil, they can charge like so much less. So Microsoft now manufacture Xboxes in Brazil, so they can charge people less, but Sony are not doing that yet.
Alrighty. We have some stuff about the Nintendo Switch now. Apparently, the new Zelda game will not be available for the console's launch. Apparently, there will be a new Mario game, and the Skyrim port will be available then. There's lots of rumors. It's Laura Kate Dale over at Let's Play Videogames.com, who seems to have like a very chatty source on the Nintendo Switch. She's broken quite a few rumor stories about the Switch and its launch. What do you make of this? Do you think that the Zelda game is going to make a difference?
I mean, I think Mario, Splatoon, and Skyrim is a pretty strong launch lineup. I have to say, I really have not enjoyed any of the handheld Marios recently. I really like Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I'm really not a fan of where they've gone with the Mario games other than that. The Super Mario 2D stuff, I really didn't like the aesthetic. Also, didn't like where they went with the gameplay. That's just me anyway. But I'm kind of hopeful that this will be more on the lines of Mario Galaxy, which is still a fantastic game. Splatoon I haven't played yet, but has kind of become a big Nintendo IP. And of course, I guess I'm intrigued by playing Skyrim on a Switch, although maybe I'm not. But, you know, I think if you've got Mario, you probably don't need Zelda. It would have been cool to have Zelda, but possibly it would be a mistake to have those both come out at the same time anyway.
I agree. I don't think if this is true, this is going to really hurt it. The Mario game's the critical thing for me, and Skyrim. I mean, one thing that just to be immensely subjective, I'm going to be bored of Skyrim again by the time this comes out. I wonder if the timing with the re-release is completely beneficial. Otherwise I would have been all over this, like mobile Skyrim, chance to play Skyrim again. Yes, please. I doubt that's going to be significant. I think if you're a proper Skyrim fan, you get bored of it again this time, and then you buy it again and make yourself bored of it another time. So that's what I think.
I do agree with the concept that 6 months is too short to forget how boring Skyrim becomes. But I do slightly wonder who it is saying like, "Oh, I can't wait to play Skyrim on the Switch."
Nerds,
I'm just
man.
wondering if there are a lot of people who've had Skyrim marketed at them that actually just don't have a console or a PC and are going to get the Switch. I don't know. It doesn't seem very likely. I'm kind of intrigued by it, but let's put it this way: if it was a new Elder Scrolls game and I could buy it on the PC or I could buy it on the Switch, I would seriously consider buying it on the Switch so I could play it on my sofa. Let's put it that way.
Sure. All right. EA have published new rules which streamers and influencers, I like the scare quotes from producer Jimmy there around the word influencers, must follow when doing promotions for the company. Videos and social media posts must now include disclaimers specifying whether EA have supported the content in some way, such as paying for travel costs, and a separate disclaimer if EA have any sort of editorial control of the content. Is that a good thing?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly praise EA for this in what is what we agree is a real minefield with YouTubers and streamers, and often it being very hard to tell when there is supported or advert content. EA are just doing great stuff. They're like, if we paid for any part of this, you need to put this little supported by EA insignia. If we did something else, you have to put this advertisement by EA insignia. I just think this is really good. I really respect them for doing this when I didn't hear a load of calls, particularly for the publishers to be doing this, because all the calls are for the streamers to do this.
Yeah, yes.
So I just think this is really good, and I just think it's like until I find out that there's a really dark story behind this, this is nice. Well done.
I think this is great. I think every publisher should do this. The streamers and YouTubers have to do it because of the law. So that's why there are calls for it. I don't believe that it's any responsibility of the person paying for the advertising to do that. So they're kind of taking it upon themselves. I agree. I wonder what the dark story is that will come out about this. But if there isn't one, then great.
Well done.
More EA now. EA CEO Andrew Wilson believes that video games will become more of a service over the next 5 years, according to an interview with The Verge. It's an incredible interview, this. We'll come on to that momentarily. He sees a future in which players will see different facets of the same game, depending on the platform they use, e.g. mobile, VR, console. What did you think about this?
I mean, I'm pretty sure he used the term time cube a couple of times in this article. We don't have enough time to do this justice, and I really do advise you Google The Verge Andrew Wilson interview, because it's a very interesting singular take on where games are going. Electronic Arts' current CEO is really kind of positing a one game solution where there is one game that you access from any different devices, and this kind of relies on his hope that everyone learns programming in school instead of learning German, which is really amazing. I, as someone who programs for a living, hope that not lots of people don't learn programming, and it's also not going to happen. It's one of the more batshit things I've read, because it's also quite a consistent view for the future. But it's pretty crazy, and I'm happy he's put it out there. But it certainly doesn't feel like the kind of thing I want to happen, I have to say.
I think that this is going to be one of those things. I've read articles like this from like 1991 in Edge. Interestingly, with Trip Hawkins. So from the same point of view, I guess that's kind of built into EA's philosophy. And having these kind of, some of this is just crazy. Like he talks about getting eggs out of the fridge and something to do with the touchscreen on your fridge. And that's crazy. But the craziness sort of within this, you have to be crazy to look this far in the future. Stuff that far in the future is not going to make sense to us now. And some of this, I think, is really interesting. Properly integrated stuff with a single game through different devices, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely think we're going to see something along those lines. Probably a bit more prosaic than the stuff that he's positing here. But yes, you're right. We don't have a great deal of time for this. Now, I'm not knocking the guy. I think he's an interesting guy, but there's some very close-up photos of his face in this, and I don't know, like if our listeners want to check this out, I think he looks a little bit like the bad guy from Lazy Town. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and I just think that's a correlation that's there. So you can go and look and see if you agree.
Fair enough.
People who played Pokemon Sun and Moon in the last couple of weeks have found that their 3DSs have been banned from playing online. In order to have done so, of course, they would have had to have pirated the game. What do you make of this?
It's a solid no from me. We talked many times about how pirates are people too, and they're people who want to play your content who often can't afford them, or for whatever reason are not paying for them. And this is pretty big. Like that you're removing a lot of functionality of a 3DS by saying you can't even connect to the store. You can't use it online for any game, not just Pokemon Sun and Moon. And you're basically sort of semi-bricking the 3DS. I think this is as far as they could go without actually having really proper lawsuits thrown in their direction. And Nintendo are cool, but I do not agree with this call.
I also do not agree. I think it's overly punitive. I think maybe you could temporarily ban people. I think that would send quite a good message. They have that ability to do that technically because they do it every time you accidentally log out of a Smash match, so they can certainly do it with this. I think sending some kind of message to people is okay, but I don't think banning them makes any sense. Now, I believe...
So if this turns out to only be a week-long ban... if we look at it through that lens, which is significantly less bad, is it going to stop people pirating? Maybe it will.
Maybe it will.
Kind of intrigued by what pirating Pokemon Sun and Moon looks like. I don't know how you get pirated games onto the 3DS. Do you hack an SD card nowadays?
Yeah, I didn't know that had happened. I'm sure it's the normal way is like through some weird game that has some online loophole.
That's
And you
right.
do that, and then that's the normal jailbreaking method. Anyway,
Well, I
so I
guess
think you
you are
have to
right.
go, don't you, sir?
Yes, I'm
Because
going to go. We've got through all of the
the good bit.
the topics. So I'm going to leave you to go through an extraordinarily large list of bad games that were released a decade ago today. And
Well, okay, you've
goodbye, everyone, and I will see you
laid down
next
the
week.
gauntlet. Right, goodbye to Ian. Let's take a brief look at games that released this week in 2006. There's so many of them, and of course we're coming to the end of this. Will we advance to 2007? Let's be honest, I hope not. You and me, listener, we're stuck in this feature together, and if you're a regular listener to the show, you'll know that it's not my favorite feature. I don't have a huge problem with it. My main problem is that I think it would be nice to spend some time researching the games, and of course, we don't have that time. The show is produced in a very rushed time frame sometimes, and it's very difficult. But suffice it to say, I'm going to go through everything here. And the first thing is, on the 14th of November, EverQuest 2, Echoes of Fadewar. I'm kind of amazed by the persistence of EverQuest, that it even managed to last into 2006. There's a lot of rich history around EverQuest, which is delved into occasionally, but bears reading. If you want to read about something interesting, go read about the history of EverQuest. Defender on the Xbox 360 on the 15th of November. I'm amazed. I never really liked Defender as a game. Those older arcade games certainly generally struggled with them. Missile Command happened to be my favourite. So if I see a Missile Command cabinet anywhere, I'll definitely play it. They have one in the Pinball Museum in Seattle, which is well worth a visit if you're there, if you fancy playing some Missile Command, as well as some very good pinball. I'm just going to swallow there. I was overdue a swallow because I was getting excited about Missile Command. How are you doing, listeners? Are you having a good day today? Just be nice. Be nice if we get some two-way conversation here. Maybe we should do call-ins. On the 16th of November, it's Aegon, the Mysterious Codex on the PC. Let's have a stealth Google of Aegon, the Mysterious Codex while we're here. Why not? We've got time. Aegon, the Mysterious Codex, 7 out of 10 on Steam. 73% Metacritic. Aegon, the Mysterious Codex Trilogy was in fact released on Steam. I'm struggling to find its genre. Oh, it's a point-and-click adventure game. It seems to have kind of bad 3D rendered cutscenes. Oh no, apparently they're delightful, according to adventure gamers. No, I completely bypassed this franchise. I guess if you're a diehard adventure gamer, then you should pick it out. It's got mostly positive reviews on Steam. Astonishing. Let's blast through a few now. On the 17th of November, we got Tony Hawk's Project 8. We got Cars on the Xbox 360. Gears of War on the Xbox 360. Not a fan of the Gears of War games. Sorry to say that. I know a lot of people are. Just don't like them. Feel clunky and slow. Biker Mice from Mars on the PS2. I think I watched an episode of that once as a child. Wasn't very good. Disney's Kim Possible. What's the Switch on the PS2? iToy Kinect Combat on the PS2. Final Fantasy VII. Dirge of Cerberus on the PS2. Made Man on the PS2. Made Man, I think, has come up on the show before, and I presume is some kind of weak-ass mafia thing. Yes, I remember trying to Google it and just sort of Googling the generic term Made Man. Ironically, The Sopranos Road to Respect is right next to it in the list, so a bit of a mafia contest there. Heroes of Might and Magic 5, Hammers of Fate, Star Wars Galaxies, the complete online experience, Scooby-Doo, Who's Watching Who, Asterix and Obelix XSL2, Mission Wifix. I liked Asterix and Obelix as a child. The books were very good. They were quite funny. Bratz, Forever Diamonds on the DS. The Bratz franchise really just rolled on in this early part of the 2000s. I'm glad that we don't have to see anything to do with that anymore. Disney's Chicken Little, Disney Princess Royal Adventure, The Sims 2 Pets. That was a big expansion for The Sims 2. I remember that being very popular. Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam, Ace Combat X, LA Rush Showdown, Lumines 2 Mind Quiz, and Scarface Money, Power, Respect. All of those last ones were on the PSP. That's quite enough of that nonsense. Let's do the top 10 UK Steam games, if anyone's still here. Number 10, it's Tomb Raider Collection at 81% off. Number 9, Sid Meier's Civilization 6. Number 8, The Elder Scrolls Online Gold Edition. I'm sorry about my phone ringing. Let's stop that. Really should have paid attention to that before the show. Number 7, Dishonored 2. Number 6, Arma 3 Apex. Number 5, NBA 2K17. Number 4, Football Manager 2017. Number 3, Total War Warhammer, Realm of the Wood Elves. I really do need to try Total War Warhammer. It looks incredible, and it's just the kind of thing that would get me into the Total War area. I've never really played those games. I know a lot of people love them. They look very cool, but I've just never got into them. Rise of the Tomb Raider, 50% off, number 2. And Planet Coaster, the Juggernaut, continues at number 1. Well done, Frontier. That's 2 weeks in a very high slot for them. A bit of controversy around that game as well. Lots of people disagreeing with reviews and so on. So interested to see how that pans out. But a great success for them. We've got one listener question this week, and luckily it's from me. It is from David Barrett, and he says, how do you feel about Adobe's Voco? So this is something you can look up online. Adobe announced something which they've called Photoshop for audio, and its primary function at the moment is replacing and reorienting bits of human speech, so you can kind of rearrange what someone says in a sentence automatically, a bit more intelligently. I think this is interesting. I think it's like a first generation move in an interesting area. Obviously, there are some horrible implications of this, being able to manipulate people's quotes and so on. At the moment, it's not seamless enough that you wouldn't be able to tell. You can really, as it were, see the pixels in these kind of edits. So I think mostly, certainly, via forensic audio, you'd be able to tell, if not sort of perceptibly. The thing I think is really interesting, something we talked about on the show before, was speech synthesis, and the latest announcements around that, I think, are a bit more pioneering and represent more of a genuine advancement than this thing does in general. Great. Thank you very much for joining us. It's the end of the show. We hope you join us next time. I'm Mode7Games on Twitter. If you want to send me questions, please do so. We do enjoy your listener questions, and sometimes, as we did today, we'll promote them up to a main topic in the show if there's a lot of meat to talk about. But thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.